Welcome to another session of Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. We've got a very special episode today. Once again, I can't believe how lucky I've been in this industry to have such great friends. And, my next guest is none other than the world famous Jason Ezratty from Brightfield Strategies. He's the co-founder and CEO of Brightfield. And, I've known you for many, many years in this industry. We've had many great discussions, and I'm so happy to be able to have a great discussion with you today as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. An honor, a privilege. And many years back, I think the first time that we shook hands, you handed me a margarita at an old CWS that was glowing green. It was fully lit up green. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
So that was how far back we go.
It's usually over beverages in a lot of cases. That's where the most creativity happens, I have a feeling.
Yeah, so. Lowered guard.
It's funny because I've known you primarily in the staffing industry and the contingent workforce management space. But when I did some research, an interesting fact about you is you actually started your career as a toxicologist of all things. And of course, you've got a science and biology background. But tell me about being a toxicologist and then your journey into staffing somehow.
Toxicology is a great field. I loved learning because you have to learn about everything, and it's multivariate, all the things that can go wrong and might go wrong. It's also for someone of my stature, if you're not a tough guy and you want to act tough, you can say you studied poisons for a living. So that worked in my favor in certain respects. And it's a great way of learning the math behind multivariate systems. So I can say I use toxicology every day.
And you did like some interesting data projects around toxicology too, right?
Yes. The first two machine learning AI type things I have ever commercialized. One in pharma, doing EKG detection of will this drug cause a heart attack, looking at EKG modeling of before and after type things, and a system to detect water pollution in natural waters, lakes, rivers, based on the interpretation of the behavior of clams and mussels. So we built a library of signatures of behaviors to know, is this a toxin or not? And that was about 27 years ago.
So obviously you've been in the data analytics, predictive analytics game for a long time, but how did that, being a toxicology, your journey get into the staffing industry?
For sure, circuitously and to some degree spontaneously. So I went from being a true bench scientist and never imagined a life beyond that. But once you start inventing things and you want them to have a life, you get responsibility for commercializing something and you start writing business plans and business strategies. And I fell in love with that. And we feel like technical problems are easy. Getting people to buy stuff can be complicated, and creating markets, especially markets that hadn't existed before, like a biosensing market for natural waters. So I fell in love with business strategy from there. And then it was right around the era of .com. And so I was helping some investor groups with technical due diligence around the software stuff that they didn't understand. And they were helping me learn business and marketing and finance. And then I launched other companies. I found my way at a business consultancy. That business consultancy went through the 2001 crash. And then I found myself applying to Procure Staff VMS because 11 of my prior colleagues had already gone there. And I suddenly needed a job. I had just back from my honeymoon and I needed a job. That's the fast version, Jeff.
That's because it's always unbelievable how we all got here, right? Nobody grows up and says, I'm going to be in the recruitment industry or a recruiter. But we all are here and vehemently passionate about our industry. And so interesting. Talk to me about the evolution of Brightfield. And now I know from the toxicology and the data, passion for data, to move and evolve Brightfield into such a data management, predictive analytics, rate management company. Talk to me about that evolution.
Thank you. Yeah, not everyone's interested in that, by the way. Like at the Thanksgiving table and stuff. This is not what people are asking me ever. So basically, in the VMS game, I realized two things. One, there's no standard. Everyone's referring to everything in different ways, and so therefore it precludes anyone from being able to really leverage their data. And so we had this line like data everywhere, but not a drop to think. And it was just like how to make sense of this world that otherwise can't be made sense of. Christopher Minnick and I, my co-founder, we found ourselves in a Six Sigma black belt class, and we got certified together. And while going through that class and the various flights back and forth and a lot of espresso, we talked about what a better world could be created if we actually leverage the data. And I explained some of my background to him and how some of these things could shape. We ultimately decided to start Brightfield, and because we didn't yet have a technology specifically in mind, we just knew that there was a customer with a gross need. The world's biggest companies are spending gigantic amounts of money on a commodity that not only don't they understand what's good or bad, but whether or not they should be spending it at all. Like how does this fit into their strategy at all? So we knew that there was a there. And we kicked off initially as consultants, and that would allow us to get intimately close with the customer and what their true needs are and what they're willing to spend money on. And therefore, we're making money from that buyer, where the actual contingent workforce program is born and managed out of, not just trying to help the sellers of the space, the suppliers of the space better sell. Usually folks with our kind of a role, that's what they would be doing. Let me help the sellers sell better. And our whole thing was, we'll take the longer, harder road of let me help the buyers buy better.
Yeah.
And that, is a steeper value prop in terms of like what an ROI expectation would be, at least harder, I should say. So that's how it began. And then pretty early on, the whole idea of helping companies find millions of dollars of savings became an important thing, because 2008 we kicked off in mid 2006. So by 2008, and the economy doing its topsy-turviness from that point, we had a list of clients saying, we have a savings objectives, and can you help us? Yeah. And we did some really exciting work, identifying a potential of 36 million in savings, but delivering 73 million hard savings, finance defined. And so then the question became, how do we automate that? How do we do that better? And what are the precursor steps to do that better?
It is fascinating. And so now, as Brightfield, it's a data company, a data analytics, rate analytics, right? Consulting.
Now I'm proud to say now it's a software company.
We're a software company.
And it's an important evolution from being a data company to an analytics company. But people don't always know what to do with data, and people aren't always anxious to analyze analytics. And so what we do instead is we usher a software workflow-based experience to get people to end results and answers. And so that was like one of the lines, data is not a good product. Software, let's make a great product, not just deliver data.
Yeah.
And so now it's specific use cases designed to specific business moments that drive an end result that someone knows what to do with, or is the action itself.
Well, we find ourselves in 2023 with what's old is new again when it comes to the need for cost savings. Right. Exactly. And it's interesting because you mentioned 2008, 2009, and that was when our whole industry took off. Right. And one of the big ROI drivers was not only the compliance, the visibility, but it was visibility about cost and then driving cost savings. Right. And so we find ourselves in that space again, that, let's say the last 3 to 5 years was about talent, right? Trying to find the best talent, and is it the right talent, etc., whatever about cost. But then all of a sudden the wall is hit, and we're seeing layoffs again. We're seeing, the headwinds of inflation and different things happening, and cost savings is back in play. Rate management is a topic I'm hearing more and more about, right?
Yeah.
And, I've always seen it as, a mixture of art and science. And there's an art, which is, the unwritten and the verbal and the kind of qualitative side of building a rate cards and cost savings initiatives, and then the science, which clearly you're bringing with the data, right? The data analysis. Talk like if I was a program manager that somebody just came to me and said, find me 70 million in savings or even 25 in savings. What is, how can you deploy some of the science, but what is the art that you can wrap around it that may not be just in a tool as some best practices a program lead could start thinking about?
Sure. So I think if I think about just the hunt for cost savings as the umbrella topic, rate management is one part of that. And rate management can have an ongoing theme to it. Rate management might also, by the way, mean to not spend less, but to spend even, or in certain cases, we've even had a client, they've changed their opinion in the last 2 years, but they used to ask us to prove that they're spending top quartile rates. So they wanted, for them, rate management was prove that I'm spending top quartile, but that I'm not spending more than I need to before the diminishing returns of time to fill
go engagement away. Strategy, right? And keeping their retention, retaining top talent. Yeah.
And so at the top level of cost savings, where if you're trying to reduce the amount of spend that you're paying for same get, because otherwise you can just like our job is not to say kill that program. That would be a way to save. Our job is to say you can get that for a more appropriate price. Mm-hmm. And so step one of that, before I worry about art versus science, is applying the where are there clear excesses? Where are there clear premiums? That it's not about beating up the middle. Should this decent price, what was a decent price previously, now be 10% less or 5% less? Like there is a place for that, but for me, much lower hanging fruit is this work really appropriately SOW based? Is this even in the realm of the types of premiums that should be a part of that? Is this the type of supplier and the types of markups that we would expect to come with that? Some of those types of things. Is this rate, forget about whether or not it's plus or minus 10% of what you'd expect to be a normal rate. Why is it, 2 standard deviations north of there? And so that top most egregious forms of spending where the rates are truly highest, that's an easy place to attack.
Yeah.
But in terms of art versus science, I think for me, the art, again, if we're talking about like this analysis of rates and where to find cost savings, the arts would be the areas of human subjectivity. And so it's going to be around the inputs. I care about these skills. I care about these parameters. I want to get it this way. So it's the art of interpreting what that person is saying they demand. And then, so that, because that's what the supplier is trying to interpret as they fill that job. So that's really where the art is. Everything downstream of there, once we've properly crystallized what is this person looking for, from there, the science, takes over. As long as we know their objectives, what they're trying to do, then we know how much is there to save. That's where it's too much. And is it in line with where the market's going? Is it in line with what suppliers are actually doing? And that's why we feel so passionately about using true transactional data, that we have access to all of these dimensions of what's happening in the natural wild. Because otherwise you can just throw a dart into the middle of a cloud of potential rates, and hopefully it's right, and hopefully it gets the objective that you want. But only in looking at all these dimensions and caring about it in all these different ways does it hit the believability that makes savings attainable on the other side. And Jeff, sorry to run up, but we've gotten to the point now where we guarantee that. We say we not only identify savings, but based on what we identify, we guarantee that those savings will translate to a realized savings. So that way we're focusing on real opportunities, not just deltas to a benchmark.
So, it really is about the data, though, right? And bringing it
the data
through the process
of that company, and so understanding their behavior, but it's also about the data of the market, and then the ways that our model interprets that market. So what is normal? What are these constituent parts of skills that impact? Is this enough? Is it too much? Is it just right? Where can I find savings without disrupting my ability to acquire talent?
Yeah. And so the data that you bring to the table and the models that you've run it through to create your software, right? Where does the data come from? And how, when you say it's the market data, right? Where, and if it's your secret sauce, you don't have
No.
to say, but where does that come from? Because I think that also creates the credibility that allow, not only your company, but the program to say, hey, Mr. Manager, this versus the market data, and the market data is this, and this, right? That goes through this process.
So what being a biologist taught me is there's no replacement for real data. And so you want to get to the atomic truth, and then your job is to synthesize at the aggregate level what is full, what is the wild, what is nature, not just this one bit. So we feel the same way here. If we can find the data and build it up and reconstitute it into those truths, that's our job. So therefore, our job is to collect as many transactions of every type with as many dimensions within those transactions as possible. And so that is exclusively what we are modeling in our systems. We pull an enormous amount of this data from over 500 companies, or over 530 companies at this point, that are contributing data into this pool, that we then have true, crystalline pure transactional truth of what's happening.
And you have that data by industry, by jobs, by markets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. We know who, what supply model they were. We know all of the different angles on how this would go about. Was it from competitive bid? What type of resource is the end resource? And, depending on the country you're in, those can have real impacts on your understanding of the economics. And so that's how we collect that data. And it's from a combination of our direct relationship with our customers, as well as our relationship with partnered companies, MSPs and VMSs that we're partnered with.
Fantastic. So, the other big topic these days is AI. And you, as a data person for many, many moons, watching this evolution and what a lot of people may see as what you do is AI. There's confusion about the difference between data analysis, predictive analytics, and AI. Can you explain a little bit of what you see the difference is? There's no right or wrong answers, it seems, out there these days, but it's trying to create clarity around AI versus predictive analytics versus, pure data analysis, right?
Sure.
So can you give some definitions, and then, thinking where they would each be used as something to think about as a best practice to move forward with at some point?
Yeah. So first, as I took AI in school, right? So I actually had classes in AI back in the day, and so AI is nothing new. As so those of us with the gray beards, like we'll start with, when I learned AI in the 90s, we were talking about how it wasn't new then. It was really we were picking up from what they had done in the 80s, and the dudes in the 80s were talking about what the dudes in the 50s were doing. And then at some point you hit Turing, and that's really the start of it, Turing and von Neumann. And so at the very start, what do we mean by AI? I put it into two basic camps. There's the camp that I really fall into, which is machine learning. Is we're going to use so it's artificial intelligence in the way that we're saying, it's similar to the way neurons are assembled in the brain, and how the human or other animal brains can pattern match to come to then predict a conclusion without having access to all the data at once. That's what I mean by AI for the most part, whether it's a classification system, an expert system that can determine what's a normal value of something, that's a continuous value kind of thing. That's machine learning. And that's what a Turing and the von Neumanns of the world, that's what they were doing to break the codes and that kind of stuff. The other element of AI, which we think about more like Isaac Asimov, if you go back to the 50s, that's expert systems, these systems that will make you think that they're human. And so that's really where the Turing test comes from. You're going to mimic a human experience, and it's going to make me feel even though it's technology, I'm going to feel like I'm having a human experience. And so right now in 2023, we're really at a peak golden age of both of these things. Yeah. And if you track, what's been happening from the 50s, the 80s, the noughts, and now here we are here, a lot of it has largely been the same. And some of the best successes in AI and machine learning just aren't heralded as much. Credit card fraud, spam detection. You'd realize what our inboxes would look like if AI was not as advanced as it was at this point. It would be disgusting.
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of like where we are in the world of AI, I think what's super exciting now and what's different and what got me to stand up in my seat and say, yes, this is different, is this new era of generative AI. The fact that we've pre-trained these large language models on the everything except our data. And so those that have proprietary data, we are then poised to leverage what can we learn about the language patterns that have been learned by these large language models that we can then apply to asking good business questions against the proprietary data sets that we have. And so that's why it's so exciting. This shrinks our roadmap of the stuff that we thought that we would have to build is now accessible via API. And we're more than happy to let other people put rungs on that ladder.
Oh, it's fascinating. So, I go back to, if I'm a contingent workforce management program manager, thinking about AI or predictive analytics. Okay, we've got Brightfield around rate management and other data components to help us, and they've got software to help us analyze it and easier to use. What other things, when it comes to AI, that you think that may be something to at least look at into potentially down the road implementing?
Yeah, I mean, I look at my roadmap for TDX and the applications off of TDX, and I see it impacting pretty much every single thing that we're building. Some of it in the back end, just making things that much better, that much less expensive, that much more performant. All of those things matter a lot to me. And so to some degree, it might not be as sexy to the outside world, but that's the stuff that I'm initially very interested in. And then is just such exciting, eye candy for people to experience this thing. And so I think there are very exciting edge applications that I think in the world of recruitment, where you're trying to interact with the humans at scale in a different kind of way than I'm helping someone analyze data at scale or requisition with nudging at scale. There are different types of questions. And so that's the stuff that I think is most exciting, is all of the nuance behind the conversation of recruitment, that these tools have a better shot at automating than something that looks at a drop down.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be a fascinating world. So, Jason, thank you for your time today. This has been an awesome conversation. I think, what you're doing at Brightfield is fascinating and driving the market forward. And I think, I look forward to having another discussion on AI and data, predictive analytics and data management again soon, as, the market continues to evolve.
Thank you, sir. Something I'm happy to talk about, especially if someone's willing to ask. And I still owe you that margarita. So anything for you anytime.
Sounds good.